So let's just get started and talk about the subject at hand with a little bit of context. First question, does anybody recognize this? I'm sure some of you do. Can anyone tell me what this is? North Star? Anyone else? I was sure that I was going to get everyone. Oh, we know. Earth. That's right. So this was Voyager 1, which was launched about 1977, has been traveling around for the last almost 50 years. And this was in 1990, just before it was about to lose power. Carl Sagan had this idea saying, just before we lose power, why don't we turn it around and take a selfie? So this was one of the first selfies. But this is from 6.5 billion kilometers away. And that is us, that is Earth. Carl Sagan called it a speck of dust in a sunbeam. And it was very, a lot of people found this quite moving because it just showed how remote we are as a planet. And this is back in 1990. And fast fact, in 1990, we actually had about 50% less people than we have today living on the Earth. So it was fewer people were living on this planet at that time. But Carl Sagan wrote a book called The Small Blue Dot, which actually just talks about how alone and vulnerable we are. And as a civilization, we only have one planet. Ideally, as a civilization, you actually want to have more than one planet. So we're quite vulnerable. We have to look after. This is the only place we have right now. This was actually the Cassini space probe, 2013. Much closer, 4 times closer, only 1.5 billion kilometers away. But the same message, and this was from looking back from Saturn. So we're pretty much on our own. The good thing about our planet, no matter how on the edges of the solar system we are, the closer you look, it is a beautiful planet. And in fact, the closer you look, the more beautiful it gets. We're very lucky we get to live in one of the most beautiful places in the world, on the planet. And the closer you get, the more beautiful it becomes. You just get in closer and closer, and you see all these beautiful things. Oh, okay, well, maybe not that. But then there's the day-to-day reality. And this is what really makes the country move. It's all the normal people, everyday people, getting up every morning, going and moving the country forward. And a lot of ordinary people doing a lot of very hard work. But as a result of this enormous growth, we do have this traffic congestion, which obviously bad in Jakarta. You can't even escape it by coming to Bali. It is everywhere. But it's also leading to degradation in air quality. I mean, just in Jakarta, had the honor in June of last year of becoming the world's most polluted city. So it's pretty bad. And then even in even in Bali thought we were okay with our air quality, and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of landfills catching fire, and our air quality was not what we thought it should be. So you really can't escape, and you have to be very careful about how you run your environment. And at the end of the day, it's about people. It's actually about looking after each other and reaching that sort of harmony between human beings and the planet so that both can do well. But there's an enormous danger just from the air that we breathe. There are a lot of deaths as a result of air pollution, which has indirect effects in terms of cost to the government, medical care, lost work, lost time to industry. It is billions of dollars that is lost to the economy, not to talk about the human cost of this effect on people's health. And then, of course, there's the heat, and we can all feel the heat today. I think we're all suffering, particularly in the last few months. The effect of heat, again, on this ordinary workforce that is going out day in, day out, the amount of hours that are lost, the amount of money that is lost, it has a direct effect on the economy, on business, as well as on people. So it's always this sort of measurement of both. It's not just about dollars, it is about people, but everything's linked. Everything is linked together. Well, and then there's water, of course. And of course, we're suffering from an enormous amount of precipitation, which affects people in Jakarta. It affects rice farmers here in Bali. It is threatening to, again, people having a sustainable environment in which to live and the ability to be prosperous even in their work. I mean, obviously Bali is a huge supplier of rice. It is incredibly dangerous, huge villages washed away. Even something like rice farming, which relies on water, it's too much. It's so much additional water. It is threatening their livelihoods. It's threatening rice production. So you just have everything is turned up to max, and it becomes dangerous and unwieldy and unsustainable. And if you look at all of the greenhouse gas emissions that are going up, and I'm going to talk about Indonesia specifically, where are all those emissions coming from? So you can see that 25% are coming from transport. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, of course, it's our focus. But also 43% from power. And I'm going to talk about power a little bit, because that is a top question. Because if you have an electric vehicle, where does the power come from, and how many emissions is that power itself generating? But you can see there's a lot of emissions coming there from power, transport, and you can see from industry as well, agriculture. And it's been growing very, very quickly. So power generation, of course, the country is very, very much coal-centric. There are a lot of jobs as well in coal. There are a lot of coal mines out there. The energy companies are very reliant on coal mines, coal generation. And that is a fact. But it does mean that it's how do you get out of that? How do you get out of this cycle of having so much energy generated by coal? As a result, if you look at the emissions, though, the emissions as a result of this energy generation are twice as much in Indonesia as in some of the other G20 countries. So we've got an enormous amount of emissions going out and hitting the atmosphere. Now, there are commitments. There are commitments for the country to reduce down to at least 29%, cut emissions by 29%, maybe 41% with more international help. And to get down to 540 millitons by 2050, which seems a long way away. But that's a huge undertaking. If you think that 540 millitons, that is a third of where we are today. So we have to lose 2/3 of emissions from the country. Not that easy. But if you also look at things like the National Electric Plan, there is no commitment there really to stop the dependency on coal. So not everything is lining up yet. Also related to our topic about vehicles is the existing vehicles and petroleum. So 125 million bikes on the road today in Indonesia, using petroleum. And this surprised me when I realized, there's a huge amount of consumption, of course, of petroleum in the country. And about half of that is coming from production, crude oil production in Indonesia, but the other half is actually imported, which I didn't realize so much was imported into the country. Let's talk about transport. This is like a 20,000-foot view before we get into the details with our speakers. When you talk to consumers about, so the 25% of emissions is coming from transport. Obviously, the right thing to do is to go electric. Electric vehicles should be the best vehicles that there are, but there are a lot of concerns people have, and we're going to talk about some of those today. And I won't steal the thunder of our speakers, but we're going to get into that, and we'll get into this with some of the questions as well. And I'm standing outside of the lines. Sorry, Renato. Quickly, where are we now? The other thing I found when doing some research into this was some of the numbers out there are quite hard to be 100% certain of their accuracy, because we're not quite there in terms of reporting. So we're all doing the best we can. But from what we can tell, there are about 40,000 electric vehicles in Indonesia in use today. And the vast majority, and I'm estimating about 38%, 32,000 two-wheel electric vehicles are in use in Indonesia today, which is actually more than I thought. 2,700 charging stations are out there across the country. And there's also some initiatives happening within Indonesia as well to actually then build from scratch more bikes within Indonesia. So there's a couple of initiatives. So Electrum, which was a joint venture between TBS and my old employer, GoTo, to actually build an ecosystem of bikes and batteries and charging stations and different things to all support, getting to like 2 million bikes produced in Indonesia, in Java, every year. And then there was Maca Motors, which was also funded by one of my old colleagues from GoTo, Dito. And they just got a $37 million round of funding. And they're building also bikes for Indonesia. So there's this range of suppliers coming up. And it's going to create a good competitive environment. And again, but compare this to 125 million petrol motorbikes. Then we have the national targets, which are pretty aggressive. So 2025, the target is to jump from that 32,000 two-wheelers to 1.8 million, and to 400,000 four-wheel electric vehicles, with 20% made locally. It's a really, really aggressive target, and it's already 2024. To increase to 6,000 charging stations, although it's interesting how technology is quickly advancing. Also 10,000 battery swap. For a while, the only method people could think of to make this work would be to have battery swapping. Yes and no. It might also be possible that the capacity of the batteries in the bikes themselves will get really, really good. So things are moving very quickly. 2030, huge. 13 million this is targets, government targets. 13 million two-wheel EVs, 2 million four-wheel EVs, 2 billion in sales. I believe it's about 500 million today, but I'll be corrected on that possibly. And 30,000 charging stations, 14,000 electric buses, mainly in Jakarta. So there are aggressive targets there. The question is, can everything align? Can we really get traction to get to those targets? But there is a lot of work is going on, and it might not be a linear path, but we have to get there. So pause that thought. Before we go on to the speakers, just very quickly, why are we all here? Who is Scale Climate Action? So one of the things that we always talk about is that all of us can have a direct impact. We've talked about what a great economy we are part of. That economy is driven majority by small businesses. It's driven by people just day in, day out working very hard. And some of the bigger companies have a lot of investment going into becoming more sustainable. But for some of the smaller companies, it's difficult. Like, how do we evolve who we are? But also there's a lot of new companies coming out understanding, oh, there's huge opportunity here for me to be a green company, to be a supplier, to provide more sustainable and regenerative products. Huge opportunity. And companies could do both. Some companies may evolve themselves to be much more sustainable, to think about people's health and their community, the health of their employees, their community, their country. But they can also save money in terms of you switch to some forms of energy. This might not be true in Indonesia yet, but you switch to some forms of energy, it's actually cheaper. So it can be cheaper and better and sustainable. But it's down to all of us. We can actually have an amazing impact just by not waiting for the government, not waiting for the bigger companies, but just by doing it. So it's about individuals, and it's about the businesses that we do business with, it's about the businesses that we run, and it's about the businesses we haven't even launched yet. But we don't have a lot of time because we are way behind. We've already missed the target of getting to 1.5 degree warming. And as you probably know, it's like, it doesn't sound like much, but that has a devastating impact, already having an impact in terms of unpredictable weather events and crises. And all of these crises, no matter what they are, they always seem to disproportionately affect women and kids. I don't know why. But it's happening already. And every fraction of an increase, like 1.6 is a lot worse, 1.7 is a lot worse, and they're talking about 2 now. So we really have to get traction. So Scale Climate Action, we're just a bunch of volunteers. We all found each other. A lot of us are ex-execs of various companies, and we just had this passion to make a difference and to bring some of our skills to help companies, to connect people, to help them get finance, just to sort of make a difference. But so we're all volunteering, and these meetups have been a great source of networking for many people. And the other message out there is that you always think about doom and gloom in the world and how awful things are. Things are actually better in the world than they were 100 years ago in many regards, in terms of wars and education and famine. Doesn't feel like it at the moment, I know. But things are actually better. But there's also a ton of innovation happening and has happened around climate. Things like solar power are now incredibly inexpensive. So a lot of things have become very doable, very affordable. They just have to get scaled. And often there's help needed in scaling them and getting adoption and helping people overcome their concerns and their worries and hearing those concerns and worries and making them go away. So we can all have an impact. This is our 11th meetup, so we've had 11 meetups to date. I thought it was just going to be me for a second. A lot of speakers, a lot of wonderful speakers, I'm told, but really great support. A lot of very interesting people living in Bali or visiting Bali who we've had passing through and giving very interesting talks. So it's been a great process. And a lot of great organizations who've also been represented as a result. We've had over 400 attendees, and this is often repetitive, people coming back again and again, but we often have a lot of new people as well. Having said that, I'm now going to move on to introduce our speakers. I've said enough. How is my time doing? Okay, a little bit longer. We have Oliver Barker, who's CEO and Director of Electric Mobility Solutions, and Gide Wibisana from Centric. We're going to start with Oliver, who's going to take us through a few thoughts.